Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our raw reaction review for Rosario. Boy, this has been a long time in the making. Yes, it is no secrets. Maybe to some of you it is. We weren't that big of a channel back then, but we actually spoke to the director here, Felipe Vargas. What was this not this past St. Patrick's Day, but the St. Patrick's Day before. And this gentleman, this very fine, awesome, very cool dude who took the time out of his busy schedule to chat with us, just two nerds on the internet about what we love more than anything, Leprechaun. Because yes, he was attached as the director at one point for an upcoming Leprechaun reboot. We have since learned, unfortunately, that reboot is not moving forward, which is pretty disappointing, because if you've seen any of this gentleman's previous work, he's got some short films, one of them called Milk Teeth. Very, very interesting, very good stuff. You could see the potential here, but when we spoke with him, he said that we'd really get to see what he's all about when his film Rosario comes out. And we waited, and I thought for sure last year, but it's just now catching us here. So Luke, walking into Rosario, where were your expectations? What were you thinking?
I was rather excited. I wouldn't say my expectations were overly high, but I've seen Milk Teeth. I've seen his other short films, Z's. And if you haven't seen them, watch them both, because they're both in between 12 and 15 minutes. And they tackle some interesting subject matter. They're filled with culture. And they just have a great element of storytelling. And, it's hard to tell a short story like that in 12 to 15 minutes, really get a flavor of what a director is all about. But you can certainly see what that kind of foundation that Felipe Vargas lays in those two short films, and then kind of jumps into Rosario with that same kind of quality. So going into this one, I was excited that we were going to be able to see more than 15 minutes of his work in succession there, and let him tell, that story through the lens and take us on this ride. So I'll say, I wasn't like top tier Ryan Coogler-esque expectation for something, but this one, I just had an inkling that there's going to be a lot of quality in this film.
And I can say with full certainty that I think that inkling was correct, because yes, I really enjoyed my time with Rosario. This movie, you can tell this is a labor of love from a creator who just absolutely is taking from all of his favorite influences. There's so many things you can just tell. Like, we had a brief conversation before we got on here of just like, man, you can tell that Felipe is a fan of this. You can tell he's a fan of this style. And none of it is distracting, but it's one of those things where you notice where it's coming from very subtly, and it just puts a smile on your face as a horror film lover. There's a lot of choices in here that you can say are, dare I say, very Sam Raimi-esque, maybe hinting towards some films that he created that may not be always talked about. But I thought that overall, as a first outing goes, I thought that this was a very unique story. I thought that this whole setup was really cool, with this girl having to basically go babysit her grandmother's dead body after she was discovered in her apartment, passed away. But the kind of like underlying, I guess, what you'd call antagonist or kind of scenario that we're dealing with here has so many great twists and turns, and you're kind of just learning as you go along, like you should in any great horror film. But you can just tell there was a lot of care and time put into not only the writing, but just the way that they decided to pace this movie. And I really, really found myself pretty entrenched in most of Rosario.
Yes, and I know when we had talked to Felipe, he had mentioned Rosario, and the kind of story of Rosario sitting there in an apartment with her dead grandmother and waiting for an ambulance to arrive. And right out of the gate, just mentioning that little line, I thought this could be really tension filled. How, depending on how you play this, it could really have that eerie feeling to it. And I'll say he really capitalized on that. This film, while we're in one location primarily, we do step outside occasionally. you really do feel that tension. You're really able to build it. And there's something about, I talked about Issa Lopez, I think, before we turned on the cameras, and how Tiger's Not Afraid is such an interesting concept and really does build a lot of tension, but also kind of has that fairy tale aspect. Same with Guillermo del Toro. I mean, you look at those interesting takes that maybe on paper would just be a vanilla story, but they're able to bring so much flavor, so much uniqueness to these stories, and really build that tension. There's a lot of great aspects in here when we're dealing with the supernatural. Felipe knows how to kind of build that suspense. We see things that Rosario does not, and just in the background moving around, and that really does build that tension of what exactly is going to happen. And it has such a different flavor than what we see. We bring up Blumhouse all the time, where you don't really lay that solid foundation for any sort of storytelling. It's just we kind of lay the basic story, and then 15 minutes later, it's jump scare after jump scare after jump scare. Where this one, we take our time, we're really building that story to make it really cohesive, and we're understanding these characters, and then we do a scare. And then it's back to building and building. And that's what we get here, where this isn't an overabundance of cheap scares that, they're not earned. There's elements of terror in here that really do catch you off guard at times.
Yeah, I gotta say, the scares in here in particular, the horror is so well done. I mean, this is definitely, in my mind, I would put this not, I think, at the exact same level, but just a hair underneath something like a Talk to Me when it comes to just the way that they handle the scares, because they're so well paced. There's a lot of stuff in the background in this movie. There's a few shots I can think of in my mind that will definitely stay with me, especially towards the beginning half, where it's like, if you're not paying attention, if you're, following into the footsteps of the magic trick, you're looking at one thing when you should really be looking at what's going on in the blur and behind the camera there, because it's awesome. It's really well done. And I think that, that's something, even as we make films, like our little short films and stuff we've done, I feel like we go into there with that mindset of doing similar things to that, because we know that that's really what's effective. But when you're on set, you're shooting, you're editing, you're putting this thing together, it's so easy to feel and have doubts that, like, oh, I don't think this is scary enough, or oh, I think we need to add a pop here, we need to add a jump scare. So I kind of see where that happens, but Felipe has a really great handle on this when it comes to the scares. He knows that he's just going to trust the system, and you can really have a lot of fun with a horror film, especially one that's set in kind of like a, not necessarily a one location, because yes, we do go outside a little bit, but you get basically one, like, kind of continuous location or set of locations throughout this film. So we're not dealing with a lot of space, and I think that he uses them to the fullest ability that you can.
Yeah, and he really, when we're talking about making use of space, yes, we're in this apartment primarily, probably for 95%, maybe even a little bit more of the story itself, but making use of that space, making instances feel different, even though we're in that same space, and then not giving anything away. There's an extra room in here that completely feels different from anything else that we're seeing. And I love those elements to it, because I'm already in a dark setting, and then somehow we move into a darker setting, and that's really where they amp up the terror. And I even had that in my notes, where it's like, oh, we just moved from dark to really dark. And I love that aspect of it, because I was not expecting anything like that, but Felipe and the team knew, how to bring that story, especially when you're telling kind of a ghost story, kind of a curse story, whatever you want to pull from, and they do it so well in this film. The screenwriter Alan Treza had mentioned the idea of the screenplay coming from, COVID. Everyone was dying, and people could, EMTs could not keep up with picking up bodies. So it's kind of people just stuck in rooms with these corpses, and how that could be rather terrifying. And that's such a basic concept, but then to implement this idea of heritage into it, and Rosario, played by Emerald Tobia, I mean, perfectly done. I love the aspect here. She's just kind of New York stockbroker in the stock market, and where we kind of see those elements where she is doing her every day. But then as soon as we get to her grandma's apartment, that kind of flips, and we start really getting this unique flavor of her heritage and things that she's tried to just push away and more so fit in with her, regular life, but then we see her just get totally steeped in the heritage, the culture, and exactly what she's going to be dealing with. And I love that we're able to flip that switch in just the same movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think like that's one of the best elements to this is just, there's we could kind of talk about the cast as a whole, I would say, but we need to kind of single some people out here because there's a lot of really strong performances. I think that absolutely Rosario, the main character, she's amazing. I think that she does have to ground the story a lot because there are some, again, not hinting, not spoiling, but very much like these kind of fantastical elements that come in. And I think that she's a good conduit for it. The only thing I could kind of maybe throw is like a slight jab at maybe the writing and maybe the performances. I feel like there's a lot of moments, especially towards the beginning half, where Rosario is speaking out loud in situations where I'm like, okay, once or twice I could see that, but it just seems like it happens pretty frequently. It's almost like they weren't sure if the audience was going to get where her head was at, and I think they should have trusted themselves a little bit more with that. But overall, I don't think any of the performances here are bad. I think like David Dashmalchian, who is only in here for a little bit, though he is very effective. He plays a very good character, someone that you kind of like to root for. He's a lot of fun in the scenes that he's in. But also, is it Jose Zengilia as Oscar, basically playing Rosario's father?
Yes.
Excellent. Really, really strong performance. I mean, I've seen him in a ton of stuff growing up, but I think like he just really aced it as this kind of charismatic father. And there's a point towards the end of this movie that we were talking about off screen here that I absolutely agree. I think that it's definitely a very nice, tight spin to kind of what at the time you kind of believe you've understood what the story is and has basically laid out for you. But no, there's some more surprises. And I think that they all really came together nicely.
Yes, and just going into the cast, David Dashmalchian. I mean, we're always excited to see him, especially after seeing him in Late Night with the Devil. But going into this, be prepared that he is in a supporting role, and it is way
Yes.
smaller, probably than you would expect. But it's something where when you have the caliber of an actor like David Dashmalchian, you're not going to be disappointed in with what he brings because he does have these interactions with Rosario, and I absolutely love it because it keeps you on your toes. You're always wondering what motives are going on and what exactly his character is about. He plays that so well. He can say so many things without saying anything at all, and I love that aspect of him. So when you plug him into this role, and when you see it, it's more minimal, but it's kind of anytime that he's on screen, he makes it work, and he kind of adds a little more attention to what was going on because you really don't know exactly what his motives are. So I really love that aspect of it. Emrod Tabia, this was my first exposure to her, and I'll say, being that vessel throughout the story, I really felt what she was going on. I totally understand when you're saying, she's speaking out loud a handful of times, but she has like some introspective moments as well, which I really did love, and I wish, when you say that she's speaking out loud, it's like, yeah, I really wish they would have. She's a good enough. She's a great actor, so it's like we don't really need to have her speaking out loud, to say anything. We understand what she is, or
It
what they're
feels
getting
like
at.
the smallest, like almost like residuals from that short film mindset of
Yeah,
making something smaller, where it's like you do feel like you kind of have to really guide the audience. Where I think that if they just would have trusted themselves in the performance a little more, I think they would have found that we didn't necessarily need all of that.
yeah, absolutely. And then when we dive into kind of the terror aspects here of if you want to say they're creatures, supernatural, whatever you want to go with, I
Got some
love.
Hellraiser vibes from them, to be
Yes, yeah.
honest. Yeah.
I love it. It is in line with something we've seen from Guillermo del Toro or Issa Lopez. It is right on brand with the quality there. So I was really excited for that because sometimes that's make or break. Where
Hmm.
if it's a terrible design, you're not going to buy in all in. So but there are some great scares in here. One involving like a bookshelf that I was like, whoa, that's pretty haunting. There's some interesting a moment of body horror as well, which
Yes.
was unexpected at the moment, and I said, "Oh, At that point, I got goosebumps because I wasn't expecting anything like that. So this one has a great mesh of a lot of great things, including that emotion. One thing I do want to bring up as well, because I kept going back to it, you can't help it as this is a visual medium. Felipe Vargas really brought some uniqueness through the lens on this one as well. I
Definitely.
love one of those opening hallway shots. It's kind of tilted. It's got the green hallway. I thought that was rather nice. Kind of brings up that element of whimsy that we've seen in Z's, we've seen in Milk Teeth as well, and the vibrancy of this I thought was
This in no way feels like
gorgeous.
a cheap film. This
Not at
film
all.
feels a lot bigger budget than it actually is.
Which was I took a look at the production notes. Just a little tidbit I thought was rather funny was Alan Treza. His initial idea here was that he wanted something desaturated and bleak, and Felipe Vargas wanted to go the other route with it. He said we need to, very very strong color scheme here, and Alan Treza, didn't see it until it was actually being shot, and he looked through that lens and he said, okay, Felipe was right. I'm glad we went this route because it is so beautiful. And there's elements in here where Rosario's in the forefront of the apartment, it's green, and then the back room is red. And man, talk about how much this pops. And it switches with the tension that we're bringing, the terror, and it works so well. So there's so much vibrancy just in this little space.
100%. And I think like on the whole, Rosario is something I'm very much looking forward to owning. If that kind of gives you like a little hint to where I'm sitting with this, I think this is something that I will definitely go back to. It feels like a very, very strong first outing for a filmmaker who has a lot of promise. I really am excited. Honestly, I'm more disappointed now than anything that we're not going to see his version of Leprechaun, because just the little tidbits that we were given in that interview, which I will tag right here. So if you haven't seen it, you can. The little tidbits we get from that, I think were great. And to see something coming from, just like more or less another writer having Felipe's vision there, we would have been in such good hands with somebody of this caliber working with that material. I think that it would have been very different. It would have definitely fallen closer to, like Luke was saying, that Guillermo del Toro-esque style. But I think there would have been enough restraint after seeing this that it would have still wound up feeling wholly unique and original. And I'm really sad we're not going to see it. But hopefully, and I'm going to cross my fingers here, maybe we can get Felipe back on to discuss some Rosario and maybe drag some of that story out of him for Leprechaun.
I'm sure there are some tidbits in there, but looking at Leprechaun, no secret, I love my Leprechaun films. I love Warwick Davis. I love what they've done with that character. It sorely missed in terms of that presentation. As I see Rosario, I don't know, what that would have looked like, because we see how much gravitas Felipe Vargas can bring to a story, and then we kind of look at what Leprechaun has become, and I think there's gonna be an expectation there of almost a replication. We need the jokiness. So this one, I think we could have got a more serious tone. I think it would have been absolute quality, but I don't know if everyone would have been on board with it. I would love to see Felipe Vargas, even though he's not doing Leprechaun, to do some sort of creature, like serious tone, just like we've seen with Pan's Labyrinth, things like that, and really bring just an interesting design, maybe something more unique, maybe something where he has a full voice, because I think he can absolutely do it. Obviously, with this one was a knock out of the park. It was rather interesting done. What a spin on something like this. So I'd love to see him tackle some sort of creature aspect, because I think he could do it visually. I think he just put a stunning visual to it.
This video is sponsored by our good friends over at Abracadabra NYC, your one-stop shop for all your horror needs and necessities. By following our link in the description, you can see all that they have to offer, from horror collectibles, costumes, accessories, magic masks, and so much more. And if you find yourself in the New York area, please stop by their physical location. They have 3 floors of everything you see in the store, and a unique, memorable experience to go along with it. So whether you're looking for something creepy, cutesy, or just super cool, they've got you covered at Abracadabra NYC. 100%. But I think where I'm going to sit firmly with Rosario is this is a very much a recommend. This is something I think you should seek out, try to go find it. I think this is going to be in select cinemas and then later on VOD. But definitely seek this thing out. Go support Felipe Vargas. Check out his other short films. But I thought Rosario was a breath of fresh air. It's another big win for 2025 in my book, which is really starting to shape up as we're moving into the summer months. I hope that we have a nice aggressive summer when it comes to some more of these smaller horror films. Because, yeah, so far between, the Jenny Penn, I know Sinners isn't small, but it's lighting up the box office right now. And this, we're eating pretty good. So I'm excited to see if we can continue this trend.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is a strong recommend for me. Just a lot to unpack in this film, and it's tightly packed. We talked about
It is.
before we even recorded. This is not even an hour and a half type of film, and yet we cover so much ground, and we do a lot of great character work and a lot of great creature designs and some terror here. And this is the somberness of this film, which I think they really zoned in on, and we're able to tell just an exceptional ghost story. This really, from the terror that they bring, from the familial elements and what they're dealing with, I think this is such a tapestry of emotions kind of film where it just brings so many different levels of things and so many interesting avenues that we don't necessarily see that you think would be a layup, but it seems like it's a hard task for a lot of filmmakers to really make a great supernatural film. But Felipe Vargas and the team absolutely did it here. Definitely go out and support this one when it is in theaters. I did take a look. This one's playing, like 40 minutes from us, so
Okay,
it's not going to
cool.
be it's not going to be as common out there just to drive down the street. So, but if you're able to seek this one out, please do so. And if you haven't seen Milk Teeth or Z's, you're not going to be disappointed. You can find those on YouTube just to get a little taste of what you're in for with Rosario.
Absolutely. But all right, you guys, going to wrap us up here for our review of Rosario. Let us know down below if you're going to be checking this thing out this weekend, as well as check out some of our other reviews. We just had another one for a little found footage film popping on Screenbox here in just a couple days. And of course, we've got a list from Luke from last week, as well as more to come with a big announcement coming towards the end of the week. So keep your eyes peeled. We have a lot to discuss, folks, a lot about the future of the channel. And I'm eager to get some things said. So with that, that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.